A woman, pregnant and defenseless, was abandoned to die by her husband. But fate drew her a completely different path in the dark night. A stranger, a warrior, an unexpected savior. Could this encounter change not only her life, but also her future? Don't miss this gripping story. We're just a few steps away from reaching 1,500 subscribers, and we'd be honored to have you with us. Thank you to every kind soul who's joined us so far. With your support, we share peaceful, heartfelt stories that warm the soul. If you enjoy calm, meaningful stories, don't forget to subscribe. You're part of this family now. Now, make yourself comfortable. It's time for the story. The rain did not fall gently that night. It hammered the ground in relentless sheets, as if the sky itself sought to crush everything beneath it. Lightning tore across the heavens, followed by thunder so deep it seemed to shake the very bones of the earth. Through that chaos, a lone figure crawled forward on hands and knees, her breath ragged, her body broken. Her name was Hannah Weber, and her belly, round with child, dragged heavily against the mud. Each movement was agony, each inch earned through sheer will. Her golden brown hair, once brushed with care, clung to her face in wet strands, plastered there by blood and rain. Hannah's ribs burned with every breath, one side aching sharply where her husband's boot had struck only hours ago. Paul Weber, the man she had been bound to by a marriage she never wanted, had left her for dead. For years, she had endured his cruelty, his charmless swagger, his empty promises. But she had clung to fragments of hope that perhaps, once the child came, he would soften. That hope had shattered tonight. The betrayal had been sudden but not surprising. They had made camp together near the trees. Paul had laughed, even kissed her cheek, as if pretending to play the role of a loving husband. But when her guard fell, he struck. The kick to her stomach had stolen her breath. The blow to her ribs had forced her to the dirt. She had begged first for her life, then for the life of the baby. Paul's answer had been cold and final. "You're slowing me down, Hannah. You and that child both." He had taken the horse, the rifle, the food, and vanished into the storm, leaving only a dying fire, the smell of wet ash, and her broken body in the mud. Now, as she struggled forward, every nerve screamed for her to stop, to give in, to let the cold swallow her. She almost did until she felt it. A flutter beneath her palm. A kick. The baby was still alive. Tears mixed with the rain as Hannah whispered through cracked lips, "Stay with me. Please, just stay with me." The storm raged around her, but she forced herself upright, stumbling toward a fallen log. Her legs quivered beneath her weight, her vision swam. She walked without knowing where she was going, only forward, because to fall meant death. The wilderness stretched endless, shadows merging with rain. Somewhere wolves howled. Somewhere, the night grew darker. And then hoofbeats. Her heart stopped. Her first thought was Paul returning to finish what he had started. She crouched into the brush, clutching her belly, shaking. The hoofbeats grew closer. A tall figure appeared against the storm, mounted on a dark horse, wrapped in furs. Lightning revealed his face for an instant. Paint streaked across his skin, hair in long braids, eyes sharp and searching. He was not Paul. He was something entirely different. The rider slowed, scanning the shadows. Hannah tried to crawl away, but her body betrayed her, collapsing back into the mud. A low voice cut through the storm. "You are hurt." The words were careful, accented, but clear. She trembled, her voice barely audible. Don't hurt me." The man dismounted in silence. He approached with measured steps, kneeling beside her. His face, scarred but strong, hovered above hers, eyes dark, but not cruel. "I do not hurt women," he said simply. His hand brushed her arm, testing her pulse, assessing her condition with a calm precision that contrasted with the violence of the storm. Hannah wanted to protest, to push him away, to tell him she could be dangerous, that she could not be trusted. But her strength had long since fled. When he lifted her as though she weighed no more than a child, she groaned in pain but could not fight. The man whistled, and another horse came trotting from the dark. He set her across its back with care. Why are you helping me?" she whispered through clenched teeth. "You are almost dead," he answered simply, mounting behind her and guiding the horse forward. His arm steadied her as she drifted into unconsciousness, her head falling against his chest. The last thing she remembered before darkness claimed her was the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, strong and unyielding against her cheek. When Hannah opened her eyes again, it was not rain she felt, but warmth. She lay inside a tent of stitched hides, the air thick with the scent of smoke and herbs. Her wounds had been bound, her torn dress replaced by soft fabric. Panic seized her until her hand flew to her belly and felt it. The child still moved, still lived. Relief struck her like lightning. From the corner of the tent, the warrior's voice rumbled low. "You live." Her eyes turned toward him. He sat cross-legged by the fire, sharpening a blade, his face half lit by the flames. "Who are you?" she asked hoarsely. "My name is Adrian," he replied. His tone was calm, as if nothing that had happened had surprised him. "You were a half-day from death. I found you." Hannah pulled the blanket tighter around herself, torn between gratitude and suspicion. The man's eyes held no pity, only truth. She swallowed, her voice trembling. "Then, I suppose I owe you my life." Adrian shook his head slowly. "You owe no one. But you carry life. That must be protected." For the first time since her husband's betrayal, Hannah felt something stir inside her chest. It was not trust. Not yet. But it was the faintest spark of safety, of possibility, flickering beneath the storm of her fear. And she clung to it. The first night in Adrian's tent was a blur of drifting sleep and fevered waking. Hannah stirred often, plagued by nightmares of Paul's laughter, of his hand pressing her into the mud, of the way he hadn't even looked back when he left her. Every time she jolted awake with a cry, the warrior was there silent, watchful, never touching her unless it was to hand her water. His presence was unsettling in its calmness, as though violence and storms were nothing new to him. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the air sharp and clean. Hannah pushed herself upright, wincing as her ribs protested. Her belly seemed heavier than before, the baby shifting with a stubborn strength that almost mocked her pain. She laid a trembling hand over it and whispered, "You're stronger than me." The tent flap rustled. Adrian stepped inside carrying a small wooden bowl, steam curling upward. He set it in front of her without a word. She eyed it cautiously. Roots, herbs, a faint oily sheen on the surface. She hesitated, suspicion rising. "You poisoned it?" she asked, her voice edged with bitterness. His expression didn't change. "If I wanted you dead, I would have left you in the mud." He turned and crouched near the fire, sharpening his blade again. Shame washed over her. She sipped, and the bitter broth burned her throat before settling into warmth. It eased something inside her, loosening the tight grip of fear. She looked at him again, studying the scar along his chin, the way his hands moved with precise patience. He was no ordinary wanderer. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why save me?" Adrian didn't look up. "Because you were dying." "That's not a reason." He paused, then glanced at her with eyes dark as coal. "You are with child. That makes you sacred. To turn away would shame me." The word sacred struck Hannah harder than she expected. No one had ever called her that, not when she was a girl dreaming of stars beyond her small world, not when she married Paul to save her brother from a debt, not even when she first felt life stirring inside her. She had been called many things: naive, stubborn, weak, but never sacred. She pressed her lips together, swallowing the sudden rise of emotion. "Sacred," she muttered bitterly. "To Paul, I was just baggage. A distraction. Something to be used and discarded." Adrian's gaze didn't waver. "Then he is less than a man." Hannah's throat tightened. The words were simple, but they carved deep into the hollow ache of her chest. She looked away quickly, hiding the tears that burned in her eyes. Over the next days, her body began to mend. Adrian brought her boiled meats and bitter teas. He bound her ribs with strips of soft cloth and gave her salves for the bruises that covered her skin. He was no gentle nurse, but his care was steady, unwavering. He didn't smother her with words. He barely spoke unless she asked him something directly. But he was there, always. Outside the tent, life stirred faintly. Hannah caught glimpses of others' children peeking curiously, an older woman with silver hair who brought clean linens, men who moved like shadows between the trees. They did not speak to her, but they didn't shun her either. She was something between a stranger and a guest, tolerated because Adrian had chosen to protect her. At night, the nightmares returned. One evening she woke with a scream, clutching her belly. Adrian appeared instantly, blade in hand, scanning the shadows until he realized it was only her dream. "He was here," she gasped, trembling. "I saw him again." "Dreams are memories that do not wish to die," Adrian said quietly. His calmness, his voice like stone against a raging storm, soothed her. She drank the water he gave her, her breathing slowing. "You speak like a preacher," she muttered. He gave a faint, humorless smile. I have killed too many men to be a preacher. A weak laugh escaped her lips, surprising her. For the first time in weeks, it didn't hurt to laugh. As her ribs healed, Adrian began to teach her things. At first, it was simple: how to chew certain herbs when the pain grew sharp, how to stretch her arms and legs so her muscles didn't stiffen, how to move without putting strain on her broken side. But one afternoon, he placed something unexpected in her hands, a bow. Her fingers trembled as she gripped the wood. "What is this for?" "For when he comes back," Adrian said simply. The words cut through her like a blade. She looked at him, horror rising. "You think Paul will come back?" Adrian nodded once, eyes steady. "A man like that does not leave something unfinished. He will not stop with you. He will find others. Unless he is stopped." Hannah swallowed hard, staring at the weapon in her hands. "I don't want to fight him. I just want him gone. You do not always get to choose." His tone was not unkind, but it was unflinching. "If he comes, you must be ready." Her arms shook as she pulled the string, the arrow slipping clumsily from her fingers and landing in the dirt at her feet. Adrian did not laugh. He only said, "Again." By the 5th try, she managed to send the arrow into a hay bundle. By the 10th, she struck near the center. Sweat ran down her back, her ribs ached, but something unfamiliar stirred within her, a flicker of strength, of defiance. That night, when she dreamed of Paul, she didn't see herself crawling in the mud. She saw herself standing, bow in hand, unbroken. For the first time, she woke smiling. But peace was a fragile thing. At dawn, a scout rode into the camp with urgency in his eyes. He spoke quickly to Adrian, who returned with a grim face. "What is it?" Hannah asked, fear gripping her chest. "Tracks," Adrian said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "Horsemen. They burned a camp not far from here." Her heart sank. She already knew. "Paul," she whispered. Adrian didn't answer. He didn't need to. She clutched the bow he had given her, her hands trembling. The peace she had found these past days began to crumble. The past she had hoped to escape was coming, closer with every hoofbeat. And this time, she knew running would not be enough. The air in the camp changed after the warning came. What had once been a place of quiet healing shifted overnight into something sharper, like the tightening of a bowstring. Fires burned lower, horses were watched more carefully, voices dropped to hushed tones. Even the children, who had once dared to giggle and sneak glances at Hannah, now moved quickly and silently, as though the wind itself carried danger. Hannah felt it too. Every sound made her tense, every crack of branches, every distant howl of wolves felt like a herald of what was coming. She pressed her palm to her swollen belly again and again, whispering words that were half lullabies, half promises. "I won't let him touch you. Not again. Not ever." The baby shifted in answer, as if the unborn child understood. Adrian grew sterner with her as the days passed. He trained her with the bow each morning, his voice steady, demanding precision. "Faster," he commanded. "Do not flinch." When her arrows dropped short or veered off course, he gave no sympathy, only a sharp nod for her to try again. And when she struck true when an arrow buried itself near the target's center, his silence carried weight. It was not praise, but recognition. She lived for those rare moments, for the unspoken respect in his dark eyes. But at night, when the camp slept, Adrian sharpened his knives by the fire, the metal scraping in slow, steady strokes. Hannah would lie awake, watching him from the shadows, studying the scar across his chin, the way the firelight flickered over his features. He never spoke of his past, yet she could feel it in the stillness around him, a quiet grief that matched her own. One evening, unable to hold the question back, she whispered, "Did you ever have a family?" The blade in his hand stilled. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, without looking at her, he replied, "A wife. A son. They are gone." The words were flat, but the silence that followed was heavy. Hannah didn't press him. She knew the kind of wound it lived in the bones, not in words. She turned away, her throat tight, and whispered to the child in her belly, "We are not alone in our scars." 2 nights later, the first body was found. A boy, no older than 14, had gone out to scout the trails north of camp. He did not return. His father discovered him slumped over his pony near a creek, throat cut, eyes wide and glassy. Pinned to his chest with a crude knife was a scrap of cloth, smeared with dirt and blood. For words scrawled in jagged ink, "Tell her I'm coming." The message was clear. Paul was closer than ever. Hannah's knees buckled when Adrian read the words aloud. Her chest tightened until she could hardly breathe. The camp reacted swiftly. Fires were smothered to ash. Scouts rode in all directions. Preparations for defense began in earnest. But the fear that spread through her wasn't just for herself. It was for every face she'd come to recognize in these short weeks: the silver-haired elder who had given her herbs, the children who had stared at her with wide eyes, Adrian who had carried her from the mud. Paul wouldn't stop with her. He never stopped. That night, she couldn't sleep. The memory of Paul's voice echoed in her skull, twisted with laughter, dripping with contempt. "You're slowing me down, Hannah. You and that baby both." She turned over, curling around her stomach, whispering desperate words of defiance. But the shadows felt heavy, pressing in on her. Outside, she heard the scrape of Adrian's knife again. She pushed herself up, stepped carefully out of the tent. He looked up as she approached, his expression unreadable. "You should be sleeping," he said. "I can't," she whispered. Her hands shook, though not from cold. "He's coming for me. You know it." Adrian nodded once. "Yes." "Then why aren't we running?" The words burst out, half plea, half accusation. "We could leave, go farther. Hide. He wouldn't find us." He regarded her silently, then shook his head. "Run, and he finds someone else. Another camp. Another family." His gaze hardened. "Men like him do not stop. They are stopped." His words struck something deep within her, a truth she had tried to avoid. For so long, survival had meant endurance, submission, running when she could. But Adrian was right. If Paul wasn't stopped, his shadow would follow her forever. The thought of facing him made her stomach twist, but the thought of her child growing up under that shadow was worse. For the first time, Hannah straightened her shoulders and said quietly, "Then teach me more." Adrian's eyes met hers, a flicker of respect flashing there. At dawn, he said simply. Training grew harsher. He taught her how to move silently, how to strike with the knife he placed in her hands. "Aim for the soft places," he told her, guiding her hand with a firm but steady grip. "Throat, stomach. Never hesitate. Hesitation kills." Her ribs still ached. Her thigh bore the scar of Paul's last attack, and her body was heavy with the child she carried, but she pushed through it. Every stumble was met with Adrian's unflinching gaze, every small success with a nod. She felt herself sharpening, not into a warrior, but into something she had never been before, someone who would not be broken again. The camp shifted too, preparing for what was coming. Spears were checked, horses fed double, watchmen posted at every ridge. Even the children seemed to sense it, their laughter silenced, their eyes serious. The tension hummed in the air like the low growl of a storm waiting to break. And then the signs came. Tracks in the mud, boot prints by the river, cigars half-burned in the dirt. Paul was close. On the third evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, Adrian placed a leather bundle in Hannah's lap. Inside was a bow, 3 arrows, and a knife with a bone handle. Her hands trembled as she touched them. "You're giving me this now? You are ready?" "No," she whispered. "I'm not." He crouched before her, his gaze unwavering. "You survived the mud, the storm, and the man who left you there. You are stronger than you know. When the time comes, you will not run. You will stand." Her chest ached with a strange mixture of fear and defiance. She looked down at her belly, felt the baby kick sharply, and for the first time, she did not shrink from the thought of Paul's return. She welcomed it. The smoke appeared on the horizon the next morning. Thin, curling, rising steadily into the pale sky. Adrian stood on the ridge with Hannah beside him, the wind tugging at their hair and clothes. He pointed toward it, his jaw tight. "They are burning again," he said. Hannah's stomach nodded. She didn't need to ask who. Only one man left such a trail. Paul. The baby shifted beneath her ribs, as if even the child felt the nearness of danger. Hannah clenched her fists, her heart thudding like distant war drums. She knew, with bone-deep certainty, that the waiting was over. The storm was finally here. The camp did not sleep after the smoke was seen on the horizon. Every heart seemed to beat faster. Every hand stayed near a weapon. Horses were restless, snorting and stamping as though they too sensed the storm coming. The air itself felt charged, heavy with the promise of violence. Hannah lay on her side inside the tent, one hand resting on her swollen belly, the other clutching the bow Adrian had given her. Sleep was impossible. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw Paul's face, his smirk, the gleam in his eyes when cruelty lit them. She remembered the taste of mud in her mouth, the weight of his boot on her ribs, the moment his voice had whispered that she was nothing but a burden. Those memories used to crush her. Tonight, they ignited something else: rage. Outside, the scrape of steel told her Adrian was sharpening his blades again. She pushed herself up, ignoring the ache in her body, and stepped into the night air. He looked at her as she approached the firelight, his expression calm but edged with focus. "You should be resting," he said. "I can't," Hannah admitted. Her voice was raw, but steady. "He's close. I can feel it." Adrian nodded, studying the flames. "He will come at dawn or just before it. Men like him prefer shadows." Her fingers tightened around the bow. "Then teach me what to do when he finds me." He rose, moving with a quiet grace that reminded her of a wolf. He placed a knife in her palm, curling her fingers around the hilt. "When you fight, do not think of him as your husband. Think of him as the man who tried to kill your child. Do not hesitate." The words cut deep, tearing away the last of the illusions she clung to. Paul was not her husband anymore, not truly. He was a predator, and predators had to be stopped. At dawn, the first blow came. A scout burst into camp, his chest heaving, his horse lathered with sweat. "Riders," he gasped. 4 of them, less than an hour away. The camp shifted instantly into motion. Men armed themselves with spears and bows. Women ushered children into the deeper shelters. The old ones murmured prayers into the smoke. Adrian gave swift orders, his voice low but commanding, each word carrying weight. Hannah watched him, realizing for the first time that he was not just a solitary warrior, he was a leader, one the others trusted without question. He turned to her last, pressing a bundle into her hands. Inside was a quiver of arrows, each fletched carefully with feathers. "Stay close to me," he said. Her throat tightened. "What if I slow you down?" Adrian's dark eyes locked on hers. "You survived him once already. That makes you stronger than any of them. Do not forget it." The riders came just as the sun began to climb the horizon, their silhouettes cutting against the pale light. Hannah's breath caught as she saw Paul among them. He rode tall in the saddle, coat neat, boots polished, his smirk wide as though the world belonged to him. The sight of him made bile rise in her throat. He dismounted with a flourish, tossing his reins aside. Well," he called, his voice carrying easily across the distance. "Didn't expect to find you breathing, Hannah. You always were too stubborn to die easy." Hannah flinched at the sound, but Adrian stepped forward, silent as stone. Paul's eyes flicked to him and narrowed. "So this is the hero, is it? Painted face and braids? You've traded up, Hannah. Guess you finally found a man to fetch your water." His laughter was sharp, cruel. Something in Hannah snapped. Her fear twisted into fury. She stepped forward, bow in hand, her voice trembling but strong. "You left me in the mud. You tried to kill your own child. Whatever you were, Paul, you're nothing now." His smirk faltered for a moment before twisting into rage. "Careful, woman," he growled. "You forget who made you." Adrian's blade gleamed as he shifted his stance. His voice was low, steady. "She made herself. And tonight, you will answer for what you've done." The clash came sudden and violent. One of Paul's men lunged forward, firing his pistol. The shot rang out, splitting the dawn. Arrows flew in answer, striking with deadly precision. The camp erupted shouts, the thud of hooves, the hiss of blades clashing. Hannah ducked behind a log, heart pounding, fumbling for an arrow. Her hands shook as she notched it, her breath coming in gasps. Across the chaos, Paul's eyes locked on hers. He grinned, even as the battle raged. "There you are," he called. "Still mine. Always mine." Something hardened in Hannah's chest. She raised the bow, drew the string back with all the strength she had, and aimed not at his heart, but at his smile. The arrow flew. The arrow sliced the air like a scream and struck Paul high in the shoulder. His smirk dissolved into a snarl as he staggered back, clutching the wound. Rage twisted his face, and his pistol fired wildly, splinters of wood exploding near Hannah's head. She dropped, mud spraying into her eyes, her ears ringing from the gunshot. The camp thundered with chaos, men shouting, weapons clashing, the terrified cries of horses tearing against their reins. Adrian moved like smoke, silent and swift. His blade flashed in the morning light as he cut down one of Paul's men before the outlaw could reload his rifle. Another lunged at him, and the two collided in a blur of fists and steel. Blood sprayed, the copper tang sharp in the air. Hannah tried to breathe, to steady her hands, but her entire body trembled. The child inside her kicked hard, as if sensing the violence that surrounded them. Paul's voice tore through the chaos. "You think you can kill me, Hannah? You couldn't even leave me when you had the chance. You're nothing without me." Her heart pounded in her throat. She notched another arrow, drew, released too fast. The shot went wide, skimming past his ear and thudding into a tree. Paul laughed, a sound that made her blood boil. He charged toward her, boots pounding, pistol raised. Hannah stumbled back, her feet sliding in the mud, until her back struck a tree. Adrian shouted her name, but Paul was already on her. He slammed into her with his shoulder, knocking the bow from her grip. Pain exploded through her ribs as she fell, gasping. Paul pinned her against the trunk with one hand crushing her jaw, the other pressing the pistol to her temple. His eyes burned with wild fury. "I made you," he spat, his breath sour with whiskey. "I own you, and I'll cut that child out of you before I let you shame me with it." Terror and rage surged together inside Hannah, hotter than fire. She clawed at his wrist, kicked with what little strength she had. But it wasn't enough. His grip was iron, his weight crushing. Spots of black swam before her eyes. Then Adrian. He came from the side like a storm, colliding with Paul and knocking him away from her. The pistol discharged with a deafening crack, the bullet searing past Hannah's ear and tearing bark from the tree. Paul hit the ground hard but rolled to his feet with the grace of a cornered wolf. His smile returned, blood dripping from the wound in his shoulder. "Well, now it makes sense," Paul sneered, circling Adrian. "She's traded me for you. You think that makes her strong? She's still the same broken woman I left in the dirt." Adrian's blade gleamed as he lifted it. His voice was calm, steady. "You are wrong. She is stronger than you will ever be." The two men clashed steel against steel, strength against strength. Hannah stumbled to her feet, clutching her belly, her vision swimming. Every instinct screamed for her to hide, to run, but she forced herself to stay. She grabbed the bow again, her fingers shaking, and searched for an opening. Paul and Adrian's fight was brutal. Paul fought with fury, striking wild and hard, his rage giving him strength. Adrian countered with precision, every movement measured, each blow aimed to end. Sparks flew as blades collided, grunts and curses blending with the storm of battle around them. But Paul was cunning. He feigned weakness, drew Adrian in close, and slammed a knee into his side. Adrian staggered, the wind knocked out of him. Paul pressed the advantage, hammering him back with blow after blow. Hannah screamed, "Adrian!" Paul's eyes flicked to her at the sound, that cruel grin twisting his face once more. He shoved Adrian down into the mud and turned his pistol back toward her. "This ends now," he growled. Time slowed. Hannah saw everything, the glint of steel, the twitch of his finger on the trigger, the gleam of madness in his eyes. She notched an arrow with trembling hands, drew the string back until it burned her shoulders, and aimed straight at the man who had haunted her every nightmare. Paul laughed. "You won't do it. You never could." The baby kicked hard, fierce, as if urging her. Hannah steadied her breath, her voice a whisper. "I'm not yours anymore." The arrow flew. It struck Paul in the chest, driving him back with the force of her defiance. His pistol went off, the bullet tearing past her arm, grazing her skin but missing its mark. Paul stumbled, eyes wide with shock, staring down at the shaft protruding from his chest. "You," he gasped, blood bubbling at his lips. "You're nothing without me." But his voice faltered, and for the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. He fell to his knees. The camp stilled for a heartbeat, the noise of battle quieting as though the world itself held its breath. Adrian rose from the mud, blood streaking his face, and stood over Paul. His knife gleamed, but he didn't strike. Instead, he turned to Hannah, his expression unreadable. Paul coughed, choking on his own blood, and laughed weakly. "Finish it, Hannah. If you think you're stronger, prove it." Her hands shook as she stepped forward, the bow slipping from her grip, replaced by the knife Adrian pressed into her palm. The weight of it felt heavy, final. Paul's eyes locked on hers, defiant, mocking, desperate. Hannah lifted the blade. Her breath trembled. The child inside her shifted once more, strong, alive, reminding her of why she had crawled through the mud, why she had fought to survive. She whispered, "Not for me. For us." And she drove the knife forward. Paul's body jerked as the blade sank deep, his eyes widening in shock. For years, those eyes had looked at Hannah with contempt, amusement, ownership. Now they were glassy, fading, stripped of all power. He let out a guttural breath, blood spilling over his lips, and collapsed into the mud at her feet. The pistol slid from his hand, clattering uselessly into the dirt. Hannah stood over him, chest heaving, the knife trembling in her grasp. Rain had begun to fall again, soft this time, pattering against the earth as if the sky itself sought to cleanse what had been broken. She stared at Paul's lifeless form, waiting for the crushing weight of guilt to come. But it didn't. Instead, she felt something else, an ache, yes, but also release. A chain snapping, a shadow lifting. Adrian stepped forward, placing a hand on her arm, steadying her. His voice was low, steady as stone. It is finished. Hannah shook her head slowly, her voice hoarse. No, it's beginning. The camp gathered as the bodies of Paul and his men were burned. Smoke rose high into the morning sky, bitter and heavy, curling like ghosts into the wind. No one celebrated, there was no triumph in blood. But there was survival, and survival itself was sacred. Hannah sat by the fire, her hands stained, her muscles trembling. The baby kicked within her, strong, steady, alive. She pressed her palm against her belly and whispered, "You're safe now." Adrian crouched beside her, silent as ever. He did not offer praise, nor pity. He let her own the moment, let her carry the weight of what she had done. That was the greatest respect he could give her. Later, she walked barefoot to the river, the cold water numbing her hands as she washed away the blood. Her reflection wavered on the surface, bruised, scarred, but unbroken. For the first time, she saw herself not as Paul's wife, not as a victim crawling through mud, but as someone reborn in fire and fury. She whispered to her reflection, to her child, to the world, "I am not what he made me. I am what I choose to become." Behind her, Adrian stood watchful but distant, allowing her solitude. He had been her rescuer, her shield, her teacher, but what came next had to be hers alone. The days that followed were quiet, but not idle. Hannah healed slowly, her wounds closing, the bruises fading to yellow. She walked further each day, learning the rhythm of the camp, the names of herbs, the voices of children who no longer stared at her with fear, but greeted her with laughter. She carried water, gathered wood, even laughed once, the sound foreign but freeing. Adrian remained near, teaching her when she asked, silent when she didn't. In the evenings, they sometimes sat together by the fire without words, letting the crackle of flames and the rhythm of drums say what neither could. Respect had grown between them, steady and unspoken, like the earth beneath their feet. And then came the stormy night. Rain hammered the teepee, thunder shook the ground. But inside, Hannah cried out not in fear, but in the throes of birth. The elder women surrounded her, guiding her with firm hands, chanting soft prayers into the smoke. Hours of pain, of sweat, of screams nearly broke her, but then a cry rose above the storm, sharp, alive, demanding. A boy. They placed him in her arms, red-faced, writhing, perfect. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, "Caden, you'll be Caden, he who rises." When Adrian entered, summoned at last, he knelt beside her, gazing at the child with quiet reverence. "He is strong," he said simply. "He had to be," Hannah replied, smiling through tears. The seasons turned. The scars on her body faded, but not the memory of them. She carried them with her, not as marks of shame, but as proof that she had survived what was meant to destroy her. The people of the camp no longer saw her as a stranger, but as one of their own. She learned their songs, their stories, their ways of listening to the wind. And in return, she shared her strength, her laughter, her rebirth. One evening, she stood on a high ridge with Adrian and Caden in her arms. The plains stretched endless before them, golden under the setting sun. The wind swept through the grass like waves across an ocean. Hannah breathed deeply, filling her chest with the clean air, her son's warmth pressed against her heart. "Everything feels new," she whispered. "It is," Adrian answered. She turned to him, her voice soft but steady. "I used to think survival was all I had. But now I know life can be more than just enduring." Adrian's hand brushed hers, not to steady her, not to guide her, but simply to hold. No chains, no demands. Just choice. And Hannah chose. She chose to live, to love, to rise from the mud as something stronger than she had ever been. The past lay in ashes behind her. The future stretched wide and endless ahead. And for the first time, Hannah Weber felt whole. By the way, we noticed something small. Most people who watch these stories aren't actually subscribed to the channel. Maybe we get caught up in the moment, or just forget to hit the button. But your support truly helps us keep creating stories like this. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel.